Well, Pancho met his match, you know, on the deserts down in Mexico, and nobody heard his dying words. But that's the way it goes. And all the federales say they could have had him any
Townes
day.
Van Zandt was an American country singer-songwriter. He was much praised for his songwriting, but he wasn't particularly commercially successful as an artist. Some of his songs have been recorded by much higher profile people. He lived generally quite simply and struggled with addictions for quite a lot of his life, particularly later life. He released his first studio album in 1968. He released 5 more over the next 3 years, but then slowed down. By the time he died in 1997 of substance-related health issues, he had released 4 more albums, but there have been 6 more albums released since his death. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of Live at the Old Quarter, Houston, by Town Van Zandt. Sorry, Live at the Old Quarter, Houston, Texas. Missed that important word Texas off the end there. Hi, Cole Walter. This is a live album, and it's made of recordings made from a series of gigs that Townes did at this venue in 1973, but wasn't released until 1977. So that's a 4-year gap. And this comes after a period of inactivity from Townes Van Zandt, which followed the release of the studio album, The Late Great Townes Van Zandt, which was released in 1972, which album I've reviewed on this channel, so go looking for that if you're interested in that. And this is my first time listening to this album, so it's come as a completely fresh experience for me. Obviously, having reviewed one of his albums before, I have come across Townes Van Zandt. I've heard his name in the past, obviously. So this is a double album, like many live albums. I think there are good reasons for live albums to be double albums because the length of a live experience is closer to that for a double album. And it's just Townes Van Zandt and his guitar in this small venue, acoustic guitar, and he's singing and playing the guitar and talking to the audience, occasionally throwing in some rather corny jokes, which seems to be a thing for him. So I often say this when I review live albums. Live albums have got a difficult job to do, in that they're not the live experience, and they're not a studio album. And a studio album tends to be more polished, and it's accepted that you spend time, putting it together, doing several takes, and that it doesn't necessarily have that kind of organic live feel of a live band. On the other hand, when you record a live album, what you don't have that opportunity unless you do things like touching up later, which some people do. But as well as trying to provide a home or wherever somebody else is going to listen to it, listening experience, you're also trying to capture that feel of the live experience, which is not an easy thing to do, to my mind, because you're trying to put people in that kind of situation where they feel they're surrounded by other people and listening to somebody live when they're potentially not with many people or even on their own. So getting that atmosphere, transferring it through is a job that needs to be done by live albums. So I have a lot of respect for good live albums, and this is a reasonably good live album, I would say. One thing I don't know is, not having been at these concerts, if it does have a feel of, a genuine feel for the concerts, but it does have a kind of verisimilitude. Oh, I love that word, which means it's got the feeling of truth about it, which is intimate and engaged. People are not. It's obviously not a room where people are chatting endlessly, and the band are just kind of doing something other. In this case, the artist being largely ignored. They're obviously engaged with listening to what he's doing. Right, stylistically, I would say that this is a mixture of country, folk, and blues. It's not really full-on country, but I think that's because my feeling of that is because A, he doesn't sing in a particularly nasal country way, and B, because it's just him and a guitar, it feels more folk because you don't have your lap steel guitars and your banjo and whatever else it is that gives you those symptoms of country, if you like. Um, but blues as well, and a surprising amount of blues here for somebody that I've got in my head as country. Now, I know these two things can sit together side by side very happily. I do sometimes, I think that maybe this is a prejudice I picked up from generally the world, is that country is white music and blues is black music. So if you're stepping off your normal thing, then you're kind of stepping across that barrier as well. But maybe that barrier is artificial and shouldn't be there. So anyway, he does a decent job of blues here, I would say. He's got at least a couple of tracks that are talking blues, which are quite nice. His guitar playing is strong, but not flashy. As I said, it's acoustic guitar, and it's pretty varied in his patterns and techniques. He does a lot of finger picking style, but different patterns and rhythms. All of his playing is there to support songs. It's not there to go, look, aren't I, um, aren't I an amazing guitarist? His singing is reasonable, is clear. Again, it's not flashy. It's all about delivering the song. And one thing that maybe, well, I think did surprise me is that he comes across more wry than cocky. And maybe I've had in my head this idea that Townes Van Zandt is this kind of larger than life cocky character. And maybe that's just because of the title of his previous album, The Late Great Townes Van Zandt. If anybody calls themselves Late Great, there's got to be kind of something big going on there in terms of their ego. And it doesn't feel that ego driven. So possibly this means that I've been wrong about it all this time. And it's fine. I'm quite happy to reevaluate my idea. What this does then is it makes it all about the songs, and there's lots of them here. There's 27 songs, and four of them are not written by him, so that means 23 of them are. And there's a real mixture here from all sorts of things, from classic country ballads like Pancho and Lefty, which is a song that I do know because I've come across it before. It's fairly well known. Tender stuff like For the Sake of the Song, to humorous stuff like Thunderbird Blues, and my favourite, Fraternity Blues, which is just witty, nicely put together. There's the occasional sad story like Tecumseh Valley. There's not as full on doing this as some country is, and it is country, so you're kind of allowed stories about people who had a really rough life and then died, because that's what life is like. Mostly, I'd say it's quite nicely observed. It's put together in a way that I think that the phrase I want to use is effortless. So it feels, the song itself feels natural, as if it's just kind of occurred rather than time spent on it to put it together. Now, he's not, uh, for me, a wow songwriter who you go, oh, if I was writing songs, I wish I could write songs as good as this. So there are people like Billy Joel, Paul Simon, Billy Bragg, Elvis Costello. You kind of go, oh, what a talent they are at putting songs together. And he's not kind of at that level. He's not A list. He's more B list as a songwriter, I would say. But that's still pretty decent and above a lot of other people. So I had two thoughts about this album that I want to share in addition. One is that I feel like it's quite a brave album to release, doing something that's a live album with just you and the guitar kind of exposed there in front of the crowd, as well as doing that when you do the gig, exposing, you're then exposing yourself quite strongly by releasing this as an album. And I would say you probably need to be established before you could do that. I don't think you could become successful off the bat of an album like this. However, I do think that it's probably quite indicative of his career. So I gather he did a lot of shows like this, just him and a guitar. And so it's possibly quite a good way of putting across who Townes Van Zandt is or was. And the other one is more of a general feel about the songwriting and about country. So people who've been with me on this channel for a while will know that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of country. I have soft spots for various artists, There's something that I realised listening to this album was that country songs tend to have something to say, and they're not just vague stringing together of a bunch of phrases like a lot of stuff is. Now, I think that's legitimate when you kind of, there's more abstract painting when you're doing that. But I sometimes feel like that's done in a kind of almost randomized way, a kind of, it's a kind of stream of consciousness, and maybe there's an opportunity here to say something more focused, and I'm going to accept country does that. It definitely goes down that line of a song is about something. And so maybe I'm going to try and bear that in mind as I meet my prejudice again as we do more country further down the road. So back to this album anyway. Did I enjoy it? Yes, actually I did. As I said, it changes the way that I feel about Towns Van Zandt as a person, so that's a good thing. And there's some songs to remember here, and it just kind of it whiffled along nicely. And as a double album, it's quite long, but it didn't feel long. It felt like this was reasonable, so it's nicely put together. So that's what I think about this album. As always, I'd love to know what you think. So will you let me know by leaving me a comment? And that's it from me for now.
Most important thing you can't forget is learning the entire Greek alphabet. I never did really understand that that's going to make me any more a man, but I learned it. I can whip through that son of a beta backwards in 5 seconds.